Not a strong, empowered female lead. That's how that's pronounced. Actually it's pronounced like Emily. So on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, I watched The Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day, both for the first time. That was exactly 1 week after the 5th of November. Do you remember? Do you remember the 5th of November, 2024, in the US?
So the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
I have concepts of a plan.
You exist in the context
They're eating the dogs.
Kamala is brat.
of all in which you live
Childless cat ladies.
If he's willing to get off the couch and show up.
We'll execute the baby.
and what came before you.
Chad, are we cooked? So it's a week later, and I'm like, oh, let's watch one of the silly action movies on my list. The Terminator. That sounds fun and mindless. It's a James Cameron flick from 1984 where Arnold Bob Schwartzpants plays a murderous robot from the future who goes back in time to kill this girly pop named Sarah Connor because she's gonna have a son who's the special boy who gets all of the humans together to fight off all of the aforementioned murderous robots who have taken over in the future. Ew, what is that doing on my screen? That's disgusting. Cut back to me. Thank you. For the record, I've only seen the first two, so I'm only going to be able to cover those. And I'll try not to spoil the movies too bad, but I need to explain some things that happen so I can tell you about the scene that made me go, ah. Part 1. The Terminator. Okay, so the Governator plays a cyborg assassin, the titular Terminator, and he goes back in time from 2029 to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor. But he's not sure which specific one, so he looks in the phone book, which for you Gen Zs was basically like a big public doxing record that had most people's names and addresses. So he uses that to kill a couple of other unfortunate people with the same name. R.I.P. What you say? But also sent back in time is this human soldier from the future called Kyle Reese, and he's there to protect Sarah Connor, but only the correct one, so R.I.P. to those other women, I guess. Everyone ends up meeting up in a nightclub, and Kyle temporarily stops the Terminator and goes up to Sarah and is all, come with me. Because in the club, we all fam. No, just kidding. He's like, come with me if you want to live. And then they get away for a bit, and he explains that the robot, who for some reason has an Austrian accent, no shade, it's just like interesting to me, is after her because her son is going to be the special boy in the future who fights the robots. And the robots just really want to nip that in the bud. So then they get arrested and gaslit by the cops, but the Terminator kills off the cops, so it's fine. Sarah and Reese's peanut butter cup escape and hide under a bridge where she starts tending to his injuries and is uncomfortable because there's blood and it's gross and icky. So she asks him about her son, and this is the part that spurred this whole breakdown. Pun intended. Although before I play it, please note that I'm editing the hell out of this clip, so the copyright robots, don't send someone back in time to kill my mother.
So, was it John that sent you here?
I volunteered. There's a chance to meet the legend, Sarah Connor. Taught her son to fight, organize, prepare from when he was a kid, when you were in hiding before the war.
You're talking about things that I haven't done yet in the past tense. Are you sure you have the right person?
I'm sure.
Come on, do I look like the mother of the future? I mean, am I tough? Organized? I can't even balance my checkbook. Look, Reese, I didn't ask for this honor, and I don't want it. Any of it.
Your son gave me a message to give to you. Made me memorize it. Thank you, Sarah, for your courage through the dark years. I can't help you with what you must soon face except to say that the future is not set. You must be stronger than you imagine you can be. You must survive, or I will never exist. That's all.
Why did this part hit me so much? Like, yeah, there's the whole courage in the dark years bit and all, but I think it's more the part where he's like, yeah, you're the one who teaches your son how to fight and organize. And she's like, buddy, I can't even organize my own life because same. It occurs to me that at this point in the film, Sarah Connor doesn't feel particularly empowered. And neither do I. I do not feel empowered. I have not felt empowered probably ever. More on that later. Let's talk about the movie. Part 2. Empowerment in the Terminator. And Terminator 2. And Superman. Sarah starts this franchise being a 20-something waitress, which is a job where you literally take orders from other people all day. Also, I think one of her coworkers is evil or something.
Sarah Connor, 35, mother of 2,
brutally shot to death in her home this afternoon.
You're dead, honey.
A woman was murdered. What is wrong with you? She's just a typical girly pop. She's just trying to get through her shift and make a living and go out partying with her roommate. If she has any grand ambitions or hobbies, then we don't know what they are. But to be fair, it's kind of hard to focus on your aspirations and like extracurriculars when this guy is trying to kill you. She also starts out not knowing what's going on, and she needs to be saved by a dude. Ew. She does bite him when he doesn't let her leave, though. That's awesome. I am pro biting weird and controlling men. This was an extenuating circumstance, but still, Reese's Pieces, you were on thin ice. Sarah is, at this point, what one may call a damsel in distress. Now, many a feminist media critic have called out this trope, and I also definitely have some frustration at how often the answer to the damsel's distress is just some man who comes in and takes care of everything, especially because that's not realistic, am I right, ladies? There's a lot to say, and a lot that has been said, about how typically this trope is only used to motivate the male hero, and that's a problem. Not to mention that the feminist frequency on this was pretty normal and made a lot of sense, but some losers just lost their entire minds over it. But on the other hand, I technically am a damsel, and I am personally in a lot of distress, and if, like, any person of any gender would somehow be able to and would like to save me from my perpetual suffering, that'd be dope. Honestly, this is another video for another day. Damsel in distress and disability. But I do think there's something appealing to the damsel in distress trope for me as a disabled woman. Like, I don't think that a character being weak or lacking power or even to some degree agency has to be a bad thing per se. It usually is, but it doesn't always have to be. But particularly, I'm super into subversions of it and playing around with it. So like, one of my favorite fictional characters ever of all time is Lois Lane, who's often famously used as an example of the damsel in distress. But I think some factors get left out of the conversation a lot, like the fact that she'll often put herself in the position of distress because she'll do anything for a story. But I think the most important thing regarding her and Superman is that, like, sure, she isn't as physically capable as him. Basically, no one is. But regardless, she's the better reporter. She's better at his job than he is. And she doesn't even have his abilities like super speed, and she's still toe-to-toe with him. And honestly, especially Golden Age Superman, he's cheating. He's a cheater. He's an unethical journalist writing about himself. And I think this is important because you don't necessarily have to be the strongest or even able to save yourself from peril to be well-rounded and cool and badass and better than Superman at being a journalist. But again, another video for another day. Is Lois Lane a damsel in distress? ? All of this is to say that being in a position where you, to some degree, need to be saved or rescued or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean you lack any level of empowerment. Like, despite the fact that she often needs Superman to come save her, Lois usually knows what she's doing and is what I would call empowered. She's more than competent about the things she cares about, she's ambitious, and she isn't afraid to call out things she has a problem with. And Sarah Connor, like, back to what this video is actually supposed to be about, is like this in the second film. While she isn't particularly empowered in the first one, up until maybe the end, in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, she's turned herself into a warrior with tons of skills that she's been frantically picking up to try to avert the apocalypse. And as a result, she's been committed to a psychiatric hospital because she tried to blow up the company that would go on to make the robots that are going to take over the world. Don't do this. Do not do domestic terrorism, even if it's against Skynet. And if you do, make sure everyone knows that I told you not to. Like, I am so strongly advising that you do not do any violence to Skynet. What is that doing there on my screen? Oh my god! That being said, Sarah Connor still needs some help busting out of said psychiatric hospital. But despite being in that position where her agency's literally taken away, she has no freedoms in this institution where she's imprisoned, she does have that internalized empowerment where she's strong and has her carefully cultivated skill set and purpose and ambition thanks to the cursed knowledge she has of the future, the dark years ahead, and what's needed of her. People have pointed out that Sarah Connor is far less feminine in this movie in a variety of ways. When it comes to fashion and style, she Probably stopped caring about that because of her priorities. Much like how I wouldn't spend so much time on my makeup when I had a job, because I had other priorities, like sleeping. But when it comes to her harsh demeanor, I don't think it's so much that she's becoming more masculine as much as she's becoming more Terminator-like. She decides to hunt down one of the scientists who will be responsible for the creation of the robots, and it's like she practically has Terminator vision when doing so. But the movie doesn't exactly co-sign this so much as roll it in with her larger trauma response. This is who she thinks she needs to be to prevent the apocalypse, even if it isn't the most healthy or effective method of action. So I don't think the movie is saying that you need to be less feminine to be more empowered. I think it's more warning about losing yourself, your humanity, and your personality in the quest to stop the apocalypse. Part 3. Okay, but what is empowerment? I've been using the word empowerment a lot here, but I haven't done the basic work of defining the term because I'm a hack and a fraud. So now I'm gonna unironically give a dictionary definition. Merriam-Webster gives 2 definitions for empowerment: the act or action of empowering someone or something, the granting of the power, right, or authority to perform various acts or duties, and the state of being empowered to do something, the power, right, or authority to do something. Yeah, I mean, like when I was in school, we weren't supposed to use the word in the definition, but I guess Merriam and Webster can do whatever they want at this point. Let's break this down further. What's the definition of power? Ability.
As a disabled woman.
Chat, am I cooked? Part 3.5. Empowerment versus disability. Does it occur to anyone else, like just linguistically, that empower and disability are kind of opposites? Like for empower, you have the prefix M, which means me. It's me, I'm M, hi. Actually, it's from N, meaning into, and then power, which I cut off the definition of, and there's multiple definitions of, but the first one is specifically the ability to act or produce an effect. And then for the word disability, dis can mean either like lack of, opposite of, or apart / away. There's been a lot of discourse about the word disability because a lot of non-disabled people get weird about it and act like it's a dirty word, and they try to make up euphemisms for it like differently abled, handy, capable, special needs. Most disabled people find this corny at best and patronizing at worst. I think that non-disabled people assume it's because disabled sounds like it's reducing us to the fact that we, for whatever reason, often external, are unable to do something. But the thing is, our inabilities to do specific things for whatever reason, often external, are things that impact our day-to-day lives. And that's something that non-disabled people need to consider when it comes to making a more accessible society. If someone is unable to walk and uses a wheelchair, that wheelchair is an accommodation, and it needs to be considered when, like, building a building. Many will take the dis in disability as apart or away, but not necessarily intuitively, but through a lack of accommodations. So semi-poor eyesight that can be fixed with glasses isn't commonly thought of as a disability and an accommodation because the fix is so easily accessible. Arguably. We still gotta pay for it here in Freedom Land. It's also important to note that all conditions and circumstances that count as disabilities are different, so some are mostly frustrating due to external reasons. In my experience, I find that most deaf individuals and a lot of autistic individuals don't mind being deaf or autistic so much as they mind the larger issues that they face in a larger social context, like struggles with communication with non-deaf or non-autistic people. On the other hand, chronic pain sucks. Like, this will be impacted externally, as it's hard to do most things when you can't sleep or do much of anything because, ow. But also, I would like to not be in pain anymore. Someone please free me from the horrors of my own flesh prison. And having executive functioning issues on top of that is super difficult and can make it very, very hard to know what you yourself are and are not capable of. Which, what do you know, goes into our whole theme about empowerment. Personally, I am always either underestimating or overestimating my abilities.
Yeah, well, maybe next time you will estimate me.
And this is a difficult way to live my life because it's hard to know how much energy I actually have for doing something. If I'll be overexerting myself or if I really could do more and should push through it or find some way to rally myself into doing it. And then that gets more complicated with my ADHD and executive dysfunction where sometimes just doing anything feels impossible. A lot of my ADHD issues involve this often misleading feeling of, well, I can't XYZ because I'd have to spend energy I don't have. But also, yeah, managing my energy is important when it comes to chronic illnesses. So just being able to ascertain what I can and can't do is extremely difficult. So all of this makes me wonder, how do I get empowered? Part 4, how do empower? So I wanted to learn how to empower myself and get some of that self-empowerment going. And when I looked that up, I find a lot of,
The first thing that we need to do is to believe that we are responsible for everything that happens to our life, especially the bad things. How it's our fault, it will tend to go and blame. It was the society that did that, this whole group did that, and that affected me. You know, I did not choose this. You know, and all that's saying is I don't have power to do anything. I don't have power to do anything. I can't do anything. I can't do anything. I'm a victim.
Yeah, I don't agree with this. For one thing, this seems like a one-way ticket to Shame Town. Focusing on how everything is your own fault actually seems like a bad idea to me. Like, yes, we can learn about how our actions may have played a part in our being a victim in a scenario and steps that might help to prevent that next time, but sometimes people are victimized. And it's wild to me that so much of self-empowerment is about how you can never be a victim because you need to take a ridiculously intense view of being in near total control. I don't know, like if these methods of self-empowerment help you or whatever, then like I don't mean to yuck your yum, but I think that can be a really dangerous path for some people, and it glosses over the larger social factors at play. There's also a whole concept called locus of control, of how much control you feel you have over your own life, and it's typically considered better to have more of an internal locus of control where you feel you have more control over what happens to you, but this video is already really long, and also no one can or should have a 100% internal locus of control. Like, it's not realistic. It can hurt your self-esteem, and in my opinion, it can get super victim blamey. And also, like, for all we know, free will is a lie made up by lawyers to sell more wills or something. So, on the contrary, I actually think that one of the steps to becoming an empowered person is self-compassion. Being mean to myself and feeling like I could never do anything right made me feel so much more out of control, but in being nicer to myself and acknowledging issues from external factors, I can focus on the things I actually can control. And you might want to counter the idea of self-compassion by saying it means you be too easy on yourself and neglect doing what you need to do, but according to this video with Dr. Chris Gerner, who's written books on this, that's not what the research suggests.
Okay, editing Emily here. I'm like incompetent and can't figure out how to get, because it's just like such a long, because it's part of a podcast. But in this, he says that the research shows that being high in self-compassion means less rumination and does not lead to too much indulgence / self-neglect and does not lead to demotivation. You should watch it. It's in the description. I pretend that you're watching a bit of a podcast where he just said that here.
That's a really good video on self-compassion, and I have a couple more for you that I'll put in the description. One from How to ADHD and another from Struthless that both kind of talk about how, like, if it was an authority figure talking to us in the mean ways we often talk to ourselves, then that authority figure would be a major jerk. Which brings me to the topic of coaches. Part 5. Coaches. AKA rambling about gymnastics, but it supports my larger point, I promise. Remember the Olympics last summer? As a gymnastics fan, I found myself super wrapped up in the Olympic journey of women's artistic gymnastics Olympic champion Suni Lee, who about a year prior to the 2024 Olympics was basically unable to do gymnastics at all for health reasons. One day in February of 2023, Suni Lee woke up with extreme swelling all over her body, to the point where she couldn't even hold onto the bars because her fingers were so swollen. And she was living with constant pain, nausea, and lightheadedness. And despite being the then reigning Olympic all-around champion, she still had doctors take the arguably lazy route and try to minimize her concerns, saying she probably just had allergies. She actually had 2 kinds of rare kidney disease. I feel like there's a through line here about taking women seriously, with Sarah Connor being institutionalized and not believed, but that gets more complicated because one is a very real situation that actually happened, and the other is not just fictional, but literally within the sci-fi fantasy genre. And I have a lot of thoughts on the topic of the sort of medical gaslighting that happens in those genres, but say it with me, that's another video for another day. Another one? Oh my god, okay, Miss Rule of 3. Medical gaslighting in sci-fi. sci/fantasy. In March, Suni stopped training, and in April, she left college and moved home, where she said she was just rotting in bed and didn't leave the house. But then she started finding some ways to alleviate her symptoms, like reducing sodium, or if you're Logan Paul, electrolytes.
Some electrolytes, my God!
She was cleared for some physical activity and started having some good days where she was able to hit her bar routines. She was even able to compete in a couple of events in 2023, even getting second on balance beam to Simone Biles at the Core Hydration Classic and a bronze on beam at the US Classic. After the US Classic, she said, "It was me proving to myself that I can overcome hard things and to hopefully inspire others to never let life's setbacks stop you from going after your dreams." Okay, so if I'm being totally honest, this kind of rhetoric can get annoying to me personally because, like, people don't typically let things stop them. Sometimes they just kind of do. Teehee, my dreams are dead. Also, there were just a lot of incredible gymnasts who missed out on the Olympics last year because of just very unfortunately timed injuries. Charlize Jones, I'm rooting for you. I hope you get everything you want in life. But I think Suni Lee gets that, at least on some level, because her health conditions did temporarily stop her. And even after being able to compete at those two events, she needed to pull out of the World Selection Camp in September of 2023. But I think this statement is more her saying, hey, sometimes you think it's all over, but maybe it isn't.
I feel like after classics, I didn't believe myself before, and I was just kind of doing it to do it and to see how I would do, and was just proud of the end result regardless.
And I do think a lot of the time it's easy to think something's totally over, but it isn't. A lot of the time things feel a lot more permanent than they really are, for better and for worse. And I can imagine Suni bedrotting and thinking this would have to be a permanent thing, and that statement was her way of saying she wished she could have let herself know during that seemingly hopeless time that it wasn't. Also, I really hope Charlize Jones can make the 2028 LA Olympics if she really wants to. Shout out Charlize Jones! And eventually things got even better for Suni. By January, her health had drastically improved. She felt like doctors were actually starting to get a handle on things. She was able to find the right medications at the right doses. She was cleared to start training for the Olympics in January of the year the Olympics were being held. Healing isn't linear, and she even had a relapse a week before Olympic trials. But this time, knowing what she was up against, she was able to get an infusion that helped, and then she came in second at Olympic trials. Again, after Simone Biles, meaning she would be able to go to the Olympics that summer. And at the 2024 Olympics, Suni Lee won not only a gold team medal, but she also won a bronze in the all-around. And that's bronze to Simone Biles' gold and Rebecca Andrade's silver, two ridiculously skilled gymnasts. Literally the GOAT, and someone so good that the GOAT got scared.
I don't want to compete with Rebecca no more. I'm tired. Proud to compete with her, but I don't like it no more. I'm getting uncomfortable, guys.
I highly recommend watching Suni Lee's floor routine from this competition. For her music, she chose a Lindsey Stirling song about perseverance, which was just so thematically fitting. And watching it live, I remember Lori Hernandez was like, she can get on the podium, but she's got to do the floor routine better than she has in Paris so far. And then she did. And I'm just never getting over her smile after she completes her first pass. Like, oh, I love watching the flippy girls. And despite my frustrations with the fact that she used one of my trigger phrases, never let it stop you, at one point, for the most part, I really do love the way that Suni talks about how she made the decision to get back into gymnastics.
There were so many times where I thought about just quitting. I'm so glad that I had people around me who kept me motivated and helped me through all of the hard times, because yeah, I wouldn't be here without him. Also, my coaches, they believed in me. Dr. Foston, and then my managers, of course. My family. It's really nice to know that I have everybody in the back of my corner.
Once I had those people around me who lifted me up and supported me, I knew that this was something that I wanted.
Suni Lee has talked a lot about how support from others was a huge factor in her being able to go back to the Olympics. And it sounds like her coaches also really come through with her, helping her pace herself and even getting her an air fryer so she could eat chicken with less sodium when traveling for competitions. That's literally an accommodation. Part of the reason she even got her diagnosis was because Dr. Marcia Foston, one of the lead physicians for USA Gymnastics, recommended she get a urinalysis test because it sounded like a possible kidney issue. Suni Lee has noted the support from Dr. Foston was a big part of her recovery. And fittingly, regarding this, Dr. Foston said, "We all have to feel empowered to speak up for ourselves, because it can be the difference between life and death. For somebody of Suni Lee's caliber and her notoriety to have to advocate for herself, then it makes us think, what about the rest of us? What about those that are underserved or don't have the health literacy or don't have the words to say it? That's where it becomes so important that you advocate for yourself and for the others around you. In general, I am just so happy the USA Gymnastics now has a team doctor like this. And that emotional support dog. Shout out to you, Beacon. You're the real MVP. Okay, so why am I rambling about a gymnast with a chronic illness in a video about the Terminator? One reason I bring up this story is because I think it's important to remember that being able to do something today doesn't invalidate your pain or inability to do it yesterday, and vice versa. You never know what's going to happen to your body, your health, your circumstances, or your world, and these can all be a lot more changeable than they seem. Like, obviously there are trends, and obviously there are bad prognoses that are scary and do change your life circumstances drastically. You might actually lose something really important to you, and you might need to grieve and redirect, but redirecting is different than abandoning all hope. See also, my dreams of taking the traditional Hollywood route being dead, which is part of why I'm doing this. Please like and subscribe so my dreams aren't totally dead and I can still make a living by entertaining the masses as a modern day court jester. Feeling horrible in the moment, even with a chronic illness, doesn't inherently mean that you won't find ways to manage it or that there won't be a research breakthrough in what's going on that'll help you manage it. I say this in part because there were some times for me personally where it was super easy to give into the, well, this is never going to get better, because I felt like it wasn't going to be considered serious otherwise. Which, joke's on me, I'm a woman, it wasn't going to be considered serious anyway. But I've also since found some more things that help, like vitamins that don't make me sick, or how to manage my hypermobility that I didn't know I had until, funnily enough, another American gymnast and commentator, Lori Hernandez, couldn't go to the 2021 Olympics because she hyperextended her knee, which was considered an injury, and I was like, oh, that's an injury? That's not like just a normal way to stand all the time? Huh. Wish a doctor had considered this like half my life ago, but I guess it's always fun to learn something new. Another good example of not knowing how all of these circumstances could change for me was my fear, even just like 5 years ago, that I wouldn't be able to find a full-time job that I could handle because I wasn't able to handle a full-time in-office role. And then remote and hybrid work became a lot more common. A bunch of people had to die for that to be the case, but still, that was a larger societal change that I was not gonna foresee coming. I also mentioned Suni Lee's story and her praise of her support systems because I think it's important to remember that Merriam-Webster gave two definitions of empowerment: the state of being empowered and the state of giving the power to someone else so they can feel empowered. So for Suni Lee, while she was probably a very empowered person in many ways to go to the Olympics in 2021, it was incredibly important for her to have that support system to know that the 2024 Olympics was something she wanted to and could pursue. When it comes to the Terminator, Kyle Reese is able to give Sarah Connor information that ultimately empowers her. He tells her that in the future she's going to be a badass who plays an important role in saving humanity. He tells her that things are not always going to be the way they are now, for both better and worse. He gives her knowledge and perspective that leads to her becoming an empowered person. Not to mention that Sarah also starts making connections with other people who help train her in various survival and war tactics, like Enrique, the man who gives her the car and guns in Terminator 2. External empowerment can be very important and can lead to a more internalized power, where people embrace what they're capable of because somebody else assured that person that they could be capable of doing what they want to be doing and believed in them. Now, the whole believing a person can do it can get kind of dicey because other people don't get to determine what you can and can't do. Like, how many times have those of us with chronic illnesses been told that we need to push ourselves more when we're already probably overexerting ourselves? Or, on the other hand, there's some disabilities where people act like the disabled person in question must not be able to do anything at all. And like I mentioned earlier, sometimes even we don't know what we ourselves are even capable of, which is a frustrating position to be in. People trying to empower us do also need to let us set our own boundaries and limits, and it's on us to maybe find ways to kind of gently try to stretch those limits, possibly, preferably with the help of other people. That whole thing can also be a lot more easily said than done though, so the main thing is take care of yourself. However, I think the big takeaway in this whole disability versus empowerment discussion is that community-wise, accommodations are going to be a huge part of empowerment, as they can literally make someone be able to do the thing expected of them. But too often, we're scrambling to accommodate ourselves and don't get a ton of help with that. Like, wouldn't it be nice to get accommodations in the workplace? I don't have a job right now. Part 6. I don't have a job right now. It wasn't just the Terminator that got me thinking about empowerment. It was also the fact that I don't have a job right now, but it had me thinking back on various issues with various jobs I've had. And the most common issue I've had at these various jobs was not feeling empowered, not feeling like I've been given the information or training or space I need, not having bosses who provide constructive criticism and instead having the kind who berate you for things like being confused because their instructions were unclear. I just want to note that this is not directed at any employer in particular, and there were some cases where I've had a couple of bosses who really did know how to be leaders, but that hasn't always prevented other things from happening that are just totally outside of my control, which just made me feel lost. And it's just that that lost feeling was even more intense if there was also the pressure of having an unhelpful boss who would berate you at a moment's notice. In general, like, I'm literally disabled. Like, I missed more days of high school than I went to because I was so sick. Things are a lot more under control now, but still, I don't know if I'm cut out for being an assistant or working under capitalism. Unless you're a potential employer, in which case I so am. Please hire me. I'm so desperate. I brought up earlier how Sarah Connor was a waitress, which is literally a job where you have to take orders from other people, because of course that's going to take a toll on how in control of your own life you feel when that's what you're doing for about a third of it. Not that waitresses can't be empowered, like, ever, though. Shout out to people who work at restaurants in any capacity. And as an assistant, I was probably paid a lot better and I didn't have to stand on my feet all day, but I did still have to take a lot of orders all day, every day. And again, for the times where I've had bosses who berated me on top of that, again, no workplace in particular, obviously that's going to affect how I feel about my own abilities, and I'm not going to feel particularly empowered. I guess the point of this section is to note that capitalism, yeah, it's the critical of capitalism part of the video essay, can really get a lot of us down and make us feel pretty unempowered. I mean, money is basically power in our society, and I still have things way better than a lot of people. Consider the facts that people on Social Security disability are not provided with enough to live on, can't have more than $2,000 on them, and can't get married.
Editor Emily here, another day. I should clarify that that was really reductive. Like, you can get married, but like a lot of people can't without like losing their benefits or insurance, etc. There's a link in the description from an NPR article.
Yeah, that's not a particularly empowered position to be in socially. Part 7. Can you end on less of a bummer, please? Well, I suppose I could offer more advice on getting empowered. I mentioned self-compassion, and I think that could be extra important for marginalized people who aren't always getting a lot of compassion from powerful people. And again, that doesn't mean not taking any accountability at all, but it is taking the time to acknowledge why you might have done some of the things you did, and have some patience with yourself and allow yourself to grow. I've seen some people say that exercising the full extent of your voting rights is one way to be empowered, and I had a friend say that empowerment to them was in taking actions outside of just voting and in allowing themselves to imagine a better world. Learning whatever you can, whether it be a practical skill or facts or theory or whatever, can be super helpful. Finding a community is essential. In-person is great and important, but honestly, online relationships really can be super important and life-changing too, and can turn into in-person friendships. I also know that in-person isn't accessible for everyone, especially immunocompromised or housebound people, but I would also recommend finding virtual groups of people in your area just so you have some of those local ties. And if anybody has good resources for meeting others in your area virtually, especially in less populated areas, please comment below. And in general, please just comment your ideas about how to get empowered in the comments below. Or just comment and say, hi, comment, because comments are really good for me, for the algorithm. Thanks. Also, make sure you do what you can to help empower other people. Learn about struggles and experiences that you don't face. And learn more about your own group's histories too. Like, honestly, I still have a ton to learn about disability history. Speaking of disabilities, if you aren't, maybe wear a mask in public? I definitely recommend wearing one at least to places where immunocompromised people might have to go, like the pharmacy, the grocery store, a doctor's office. But it's also probably just a good idea for you as well. Like, I've been getting a lot less sick since being more vigilant about masking more. And get vaccinated while you still can. Side note, Do you think that, like, vaccines cause autism, RFK, and Aspie supremacist Elon Musk have ever, like, talked about it? Anyway, conclusion. I didn't come up with a good name for the conclusion. It would be easy to feel the opposite of empowered with the foresight of the possibilities of the world just absolutely falling apart. But the future is not set in stone. And just because you aren't and or don't feel empowered right now doesn't mean that's always going to be the case. But in reality, you don't have to go it alone because you aren't like the sole chosen one or the special boy or the special boy's mom, because that's not really how it'd go down. Like, that's kind of a narrative device and probably a sign of our culture's individualism. If/when the robot apocalypse happens, it's not just going to be John Connor, it's going to be like a group effort. Let the potential for impending doom motivate you, not lead you to despair. But also, like, don't become the Terminator. Don't lose sight of yourself in the process. And it might be good to take, like, a self-defense class or something if you're able to, but there's a lot of other things that can be important too. Just do what you can. Try to practice self-compassion, make art, learn stuff, be kind to others, and most of all, do whatever you can to survive. Even if just out of spite. Before I do the outro, I do have a fundraiser that I'd like you to donate to. If you're able, I want to start shouting out fundraisers and organizations doing cool stuff. But I also know this person. One of my friends who wants to remain anonymous has long COVID and is struggling financially, especially between like lawyer fees to get on disability and the cost of things like electrolytes, which as someone who has POTS as well, like, yeah, that's pretty important and not usually covered by insurance. So if you're able to donate or even just share her fundraiser, I'll put it in the description below. It would mean a lot and it would help empower someone. Wow, I brought it back. I'll leave you with this. The call is there for everyone, not just Sarah Connor. What do you do? What can you do? How can you figure out what to do? I don't know, think about it. As for me, hopefully I get into making more consistent videos. I might start a Patreon soon, but I want to make sure I make 2 videos not over a year apart first, so I guess you could say I'll be back. Okay, please like and subscribe. Also comment if you are still here, please comment. I mean, comment anything, but if you want to show off that you're still here and you need something to comment M ability, like the whole empower disability thing that we were talking about, like EM and then ability. If you hit the bell icon, because I'm just so like so changeable, so unpredictable, so random, LOLXD, rawr. No, but yeah, if you do all those things, I'm so appreciative. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this much. Thank you for even watching the end rambling. I love you. No, I don't. Probably. I don't know. I probably don't know you. Unless I do, in which case I love you. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Thank you.